again, everybody. Well, this is Ed with another episode of Call Me Mr. Broadstreet. As my very special guest today, I've got Charles Rosenay, Beatles promoter, author, expert. I just want to go ahead and kind of go off the little script I have, and we'll go ahead and ask Charles some questions. First of all, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Always great to be on with a fellow fan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, as I said, Beatles fan and expert. He's met famous folks, just naming two out of probably many, such as Mickey Dolenz and one Paul McCartney. Where have I heard that name before? I wonder. And he's also very busy in the entertainment industry as an actor, promoter, music aficionado, entertainer, MC, DJ, humorist, author, you name it. I don't know when you find time to sleep, to be honest. Since 1978, Charles has produced Beatles conventions and festivals. Since 1983, about 40 years, if I'm correct, organizer and host of the Magical History Tour, which is bringing Beatles fans to both Liverpool and London. And also for over 20 years, published and edited one of the world's most famous, Beatles and 60s magazines, Good Day Sunshine. Promoted Monkeys convention since the early 80s. And as we chatted before, we both met back in September 2022 for a peak best appearance at a convention in Massachusetts. And his latest book of the book of top 10 Beatles lists is out now. Again, just welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Woohoo!
There we go. Well, I've still got to order mine, but I like how I got this right here, the horror list that you gave me an autograph for me. I really appreciate that. Here, I'll show a real quick inscription there. Really, really cool. I don't know if the camera's catching it, but
so nice. Look at that.
Yeah, it was really cool to meet you. I was, when we bumped into each other, I was like, as soon as you said your name, I'm like, oh my God, I was so amazed. Just so amazing. Again, such an honor. So we'll go ahead and get into our questions here. So we're going to go ahead and start with the latest project. So as you just held up the book of top 10 Beatles list. So without giving too much away, what revelations do you think that we're going to learn from this book, especially for kind of more hardcore fans, maybe like ourselves, as opposed to the more casual fan?
Oh, great question. So with the first one, which you showed, the book of top 10 horror lists, right? You see there's a similarity here. There's a little theme going. And they're both great pop culture celebrity books in that the gist of the books is getting the top 10 lists from people besides myself. It'd be easy for me to write a book of top 10, my favorite Beatles songs, my favorite solo songs, my favorite album. But I thought it would be more interesting and more mass appeal if I got celebrities and people in the Beatles inner circle to give me their lists. And with that in mind, what this book unearthed is a lot of people who had connections, they were associates, they were relatives of the Beatles. And in giving me their lists, I wouldn't take just a list. I don't want 10 names of songs. I want 10 specific things with reasons why. So Paul McCartney's half-sister, Ruth McCartney, came up with the 10 places in Liverpool that stand out in her mind. So the revelations become what is part and parcel of not just the list, but the descriptions of the list. Pete Best gives us a list, and people who played with the Beatles at the Cavern give us lists. And fellow label mates of the Beatles, a guy named Frank Ifield, who recorded on the same VJ label as their earliest stuff. I mean, just to find this guy, where has he been, for 50 years, and to get his list. That's the stuff that I'm really proud of. I guess if you're a baseball fan, you're excited because you got a list from Dave Winfield. If you're a rock and roller, there's a list from one of the Cars, one of the Vanilla Fudge, one of the B-52s, and that's all cool. But for a purist like myself, it was digging in deep and getting, the real tough Beatle connection people to give their list that made it worthwhile. Chaz Newby, do you know the name?
Yes, 1941 bass player, born the same day as Paul McCartney 1 year later. That Chaz Newby?
The one and only, the first Beatles left-handed bass player.
Yes.
I got his list. So things like that were for me pretty special, to get people who you don't hear about every single day and you don't walk into on the streets, you don't see on television, but to get them, to give their lists. I'm a big Badfinger fan, and the only person you think about as remaining of Badfinger is Joey Molland.
Yep.
Well, a guy by the name of Bob Jackson played with Badfinger and, still carries the torch in the UK. A guy named Jeffrey Allen Ross, who's Peter Asher's music director, played with Badfinger for a while as well. And a guy by the name of Ron Griffith was a member of the Ivies before Joey Molland. I got all four of them in the book giving us lists, and I got a bunch of the Quarrymen. So, for the real purists, they're going to love this book. There's so much, Beatles history and Beatles trivia and really just amazing stuff in there that it's going to work for them, as well as the general fan who picks up the book and just wants to read people's top 10 lists.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, Chaz Newby, you're speaking my language already. Oh my goodness. As we knew when we first met. I'm gonna go through a few more questions. We're gonna bounce around the timeline a little bit if that's okay. So
Sure.
One of the first things I remember reading a while back, if please correct me if I'm wrong, back in 1990, you met both Paul and Linda McCartney during the Flowers in the Dirt tour. Can you just describe a little bit of what that was like? And was that your first meeting with him?
Well, we met at the NEC in Birmingham, England prior, and that was backstage with Sam Leach, who is no longer with us, but he was one of the early Mersey promoters. He did a lot of the concerts outside of the Cavern Club and the surrounding areas of Liverpool. And Sam was a great guy, and he introduced me to Paul backstage at that concert in England, along with his daughter Sammy. And so I'd met Paul there, and I met him a few times, and then come Linda and Paul at a big event which MTV sponsored. It was in celebration of Paul playing the largest concert of all time to that date. I think it was in Rio, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And I went with my friend Stacy, and we flew to London just for the event. And got quality time. Now, that was the 10th anniversary of my Beatles magazine, Good Day Sunshine. And once a year, we would put out an audio edition. We'd put out, in those days, on cassette. And what I did is my goal was to get Paul, the members of his band who were all there, everyone, to give a message to the fans. And sure enough, he said, congratulations to the members. And then I took it a step further. I reached out to people who like Tony Sheridan and Richie Havens and all these people to also give us, nice compliments or nice words for the audio edition. Nowadays, we would have got them to stream, a message and put it on YouTube and a video. In those days, pre-CD, pre-internet, pre-streaming, we got them to do it on a cassette. And that was just great because, Paul was just so wonderful. At the time, I was publishing Good Day Sunshine, and, I had about 10 editors of the magazine. And you can't ever thank people who contribute month after month articles and graphics and all that good stuff. Well, this is how I thank them. I got Paul to autograph an item for each one of them. When I got back to the States, I sent them all autographs. So that was how I was able to thank my Good Day Sunshine staff at the time. And I'd met Paul, a bunch of times at press conferences and backstage at concerts, prior to, afterwards, and sometimes just fluke. It was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I needed to go to the bathroom, walked out the wrong door, and there's Paul with his PR guy, Jeff Baker. Jeff's giving him instructions. I go, hey, Paul. Hey, Jeff, sorry to bother you. I just kept walking. So a lot of those scenarios.
Wow, well, that's great. That was my first tour, actually, 1990, July 4th, 1990, RFK Stadium. Thank you. Wow. Thank you to my dad and mom. Love you both. I know they're watching. All right. Well, you know what? I'll go ahead and segue into the next question. And this could be a short or long answer if you want. But, kind of what are some of your favorite Beatles solo singles that you've kind of heard over the years? And kind of expanding to be, obviously all of them, since I try to focus on that.
Yeah. So it's funny because in this book, I had it done, and then my editor, my proofreader, Janet Davis says, "Where's your top 10 list?" And my daughter, who did the graphics and helped with the cover and did stuff, said, "Dad, how can you not do a top 10 list?" I'm thinking, well, in the horror book, my top 10 list was very different than anyone else's. I put in my top 10 favorite horror roles that I've done, my favorite acting roles. And for the Beatle one, I'm thinking, wait, maybe I should do my top 10 favorite things that I was connected to, or my top 10 favorite conventions, whatever. But I got to tell you, I put so many pictures of myself in the book with the celebrities that I thought, all right, it'll be a little too much ego if I'm going to do that kind of top 10 list. So I did, my favorite this and that. And one of the ones was my favorite solo songs. And I had to think about it long and hard, because I always know that my Ringo one is a song called 6 O'Clock that Paul wrote. And the problem is, even saying the word 6 o'clock, I'm already hearing it in my head. It's one of those songs that's my ear bug, my infectious ones. So that was my Paul song. My George song was tough, because While My Guitar Gently Weeps is one of my favorite, Harrison Beatle tracks. For solo tracks, it was really tough. And I wanted to pull one out and say maybe, Bangladesh, something that no one else picks, because I love songs that have that intro, like Bad to Me by Billy J. Kramer, or Tossing and Turning by Bobby Turner, which then go into the song. You know what I mean? But for Paul, I was able to get that pretty easily, because it was not only one of my favorites, but it was also my kids' favorites. We would drive in the car when they were real young and go to school, and them being big Marvel fans and superhero fans, Magneto and Titanium Man was one that we would always go to. For John, it was the most emotional, because just like Starting Over was the song that really, hit hard for me, because I loved it so much when it came out, and it had so much more importance after we lost him. So when you're asking about solo songs, those are some of the ones that come to mind right off the bat as my favorites.
Excellent choices. Really, I mean, you can't go wrong with
Can't go wrong with any of them, but
yeah, really not too many I could think of. And I just wanted to go so next, just sort of thinking, especially since we got to meet Pete Best back in September. That was my first experience meeting Pete, which was an honor.
Yeah.
What was it like, your first experience meeting Pete Best? What was that like for you? What were the circumstances?
Well, I met him in Liverpool, and I actually spent an amazing night. As you know, I do the Beatle tours to Liverpool. We go there every summer. We bring groups of fans, and we go to the Cavern, we go Abbey Road, Penny Lane, Strawberry Field. We do it all. And this particular year, the Best family reopened the Casbah as a special treat for us. And I remember dancing with Mona, with Pete's mom. And, Pete and I, we hit it off. And I said, you got to come back to the States and come to my Beatles convention. He said he'd love to. And he came to 2 years in a row. But I don't want to say milked it, but I really, got Pete a lot of things. We did so many shows, Philadelphia, and we did Cleveland, and we did Columbus. And I was really bringing him onto a lot of tours, to the point where I was also booking him on college talking dates. So Pete and I really, just to this day, we're talking about over 40 years of friendship. And it was great seeing him again, because I, hadn't taken a picture with him for a while, because, when you know someone very well, you just don't ask for an autograph anymore. You don't ask for a picture anymore. You've done that. It's been done so many times. In fact, in the book, I put in a bunch of pictures of Pete, but I was really pleased, because I think I did a now and then one. You're going to love it when you see it. It was one that from the day, well, there's a bunch of them, but it says myself on stage with Pete Best and Horst Fascher from Hamburg.
Yes.
And then there's a shot of us together at the convention that you and I were at.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yep.
Where I showed him his top 10 list from the prior book. He'd never seen that. He was in the horror book. He gave me a great list for that. And he'd been promising me a list for the Beatles top 10 book, literally for the 2 or 3 years that I was working on it. And Rogue, his brother, said, yeah, we'll get it for you. We'll get it. Well, that could go on for years. Finally, at that convention, I nailed them both down, put a pen in their hand, gave them a sheet, made it easy. And I got top 10 lists for this book from Pete and from Rogue, which is very, very proud of. But maybe my best memory, and Pete and Rogue, forgive me, was Dancing with Mona, was dancing with their mom at the Casbah. I mean, that was, Mona reminded me of my mom, and she was just so special. And we had a connection, and it was just that was pretty great.
Wow, that's so cool. And yeah, I can relate to just telling him. I think my experience, I forgot if we discussed it. I just sort of went up to him, was like, what am I going to say to him? I just sort of turned to him and said, thank you for being part of the story. What else are you going to say to somebody
Yes.
who's been doing these conventions all these years? Well, speaking of more recognition, maybe going a little bit more down the Beatles solo songs path, are there any songs that you think should kind of get more recognition from the catalog as far as Beatles solo songs, like deeper cuts, things like that you wish more people knew about?
That's a great question. So I think the people who need to know kind of know them. Growing up, I remember we talked about my kids and Magneto and Titanium Man. I started with a disc of what the kids needed to know right off the bat. And it was Yellow Sub and Maxwell Silver Hammer. It was All Together Now. It was She Loves You. It was My Bonnie. It was what I thought were, really easy sing-along songs. And the kids loved it so much and overplayed it so much in the car that it was like, Dad, can you give us another? Well, we did a bunch of volumes of those. And finally it got to the point where I left out maybe Tomorrow Never Knows. There's certain songs that weren't never on their things. And then as years later, they would hear these songs, they go, why didn't you put those on the discs? How could you have left these off? These are great. And I guess Tomorrow Never Knows kind of jumps out as one of those songs. Another one, if you put a real great dance beat to it, I think Only a Northern Song would be a great club mix. But I don't think there's many, because to me, there's no such thing as a deep track. I don't recognize the songs as B cuts or songs that are unknown to fans, because I'm so, ingrained in it. Maybe my name, look up my number. I don't know which ones a casual fan might not know as well. That's a tough one for me to remove myself from being so close to all of them and being able to answer.
No, okay, that's totally good. And just knowing, hey, there's so many that just, and let alone the solo material, and there's literally a wealth of 60 years of material plus right now.
True. Unreleased stuff and alternate
Oh, yeah.
versions, right?
Yes.
And live versions. Yeah, it's a lot more than just the catalog.
I'm personally hoping for a Broad Street box set, if anybody out there is listening. But so you talked about earlier, mentioned about the Magical History Tour, and I think you kind of covered this in one of your answers. But what are just some of your favorite memories that you've been doing these tours for so long, for about a 40-year period, or so? What are some of your favorite memories? I know one of them you said was dancing with Mona. She sounded like such a sweet woman, and obviously cute and rogue.
Yeah.
Any other memories that stick out to you that you can think of, big or small?
For me personally, being honored a few years by the mayor of Liverpool, being titled the unofficial ambassador to Liverpool for bringing over thousands and thousands of fans all these years, that's just special to me personally, as is I'm one of the few non-musicians who are inducted into the Cavern Club's Hall of Fame. Though those are special, but so many scenarios where just hanging out with people like John Lennon's sister Julia, just being with them in Liverpool, in the places where they were. She once went on a tour with us with one of our groups on the coach, and it became kind of her life in where we went. We would normally go through all the places that were John, Paul, George, Ringo, and all of a sudden it became very Lennon-esque, because we were doing a lot of places. Well, you don't realize, she goes, well, you don't realize that we also lived here. It's like, what? This was amazing. So a lot of the things that happened, really, some of them were not even expected. There was one year, I love telling the story. We were on our way. We do London first, 3 days London, and then we go to Liverpool. For some years, we used to add another city on. We would do Hamburg. We did Scotland. We did Amsterdam. We did a few before. But now it's pretty much London and Liverpool. And we were set to leave London early in the morning, like 8 or 9 a.m., get to Liverpool midday. One of the gals on the trip happened to have picked up a local London newspaper, and that London newspaper said that there was a toy store, and Hamleys, I think it was called, right in central London. that was having a fundraising sale of this new ecological game, and Julian Lennon was going to be there to sign copies of this game to promote the sales of it. And the gal shows me the paper and goes, Charles, is there any chance we could go to Liverpool a little later and go to this first? And I'm like, ooh, when does it open? She goes, well, 10 a.m. I go, when's Julian going to be there? Noon. I go, okay, that works. We'll do it. Of course. Hello, an opportunity to see Julian in London. The whole group, we delayed our coach. Cost a fortune to change the hours of it. But you know what? We all got to meet him. We got his autograph. We took pictures with him. And some of the things that are highlights of and memories of mine on these trips are those that weren't even, in our original itinerary. There's no way we could have predicted 6 months in advance that we were going to see Julian. Another one was getting into Strawberry Fields before. Now it's an official tourist attraction. We got in there, just because we did groups, and Cavern City Tours, our partners, opened it up for a big concert one day, and they did a festival there. So a lot of the things that happen on these trips, yeah, we plan them forever, and we've got them down to a science. But if there's an opportunity for something else special, we jump on it. And those are some of the best memories that I have personally.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing that. That's so cool right there. Just some of the unexpected, unplanned things that happen, the best things, some of the best things in life. Yeah. Another question I've sort of got. So, I know you do a lot of projects, especially with a new book, new project. What are some of the things that kind of help you to keep kind of focused and inspired? I mean, I know there's the fandom and everything, but kind of disciplined, with so many things going on. How do you do it?
So I'm one of these guys who doesn't have fun like laying on a couch and watching, whatever it is. If I'm streaming, and if I'm what's the word when binging Stranger Things or the new whatever it is, I'm also working at the same time. And the time that I don't work is when I'm with my kids, with my wife, my family. That's when I'm turn everything off. But I play basketball 3 times a week to stay in shape. I DJ on weekends, and unlike most people, I don't go to an office from 9 to 5. So when I do get up, if on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if I can sleep till 10 or 11, I do. And then I'm working, but it's not work. Putting together a book is not work. Preparing for a convention, that's not work. Going out and DJing and entertaining at a wedding or bar mitzvah, that's not work. Everything I do, I'm really blessed because it doesn't just bring me joy, but everything I do brings other people joy. We do the Beatle tours to Liverpool, and people just have the greatest time. And I have this other life of horror where I do, about the Beatle book and the horror book, but I do Dracula tours to Transylvania. I do ghost tours. I do paranormal ghost walks in Connecticut. I love all this stuff, and all the people that go on these things love them too. So again, the things that I do makes people happy. I'm so blessed that I can do that and make and be happy and feed the family too. That's a very important part of it. I just, I've been very lucky in my whole life that I haven't had to, work on roofs. I haven't had to, plow out driveways for a living. I've been able to make all the things that I love my businesses.
Wow. All of us could just dream of that, I mean, that's something hopefully for me to strive for, it's, wow. Well, I've got some word association questions. I figured I'd try something a little bit different from, last time when, I was on sort of Ken Michaels' show. Love Ken. I got to meet him at the convention. Real quick, I got to meet Mr. Mayo at the convention too. So just so cool to be able to meet all of you, meeting yourself, obviously.
A lot of great people. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. And you know what? So around 1974, correct me if I'm wrong, my memory might be almost full. You see what I did there? Yeah. With John Lennon did an interview. So it was kind of, I think, one or a couple word answers, sort of free association, stream of consciousness type of thing. So going to divide it into a couple things. And, it could be one word, a couple words, maybe a little more rapid fire. So here we go. Nothing.
This is a challenge. this is a challenge for me because I like to blab. You ask a question, I go on tangents. I'm going to have to work hard on this one.
No, that's fine. That's a take your time. We'll just we'll just go through just a couple things. Just people you may or may not have met. I think most of these you have met on the list. Just some kind of feelings, impressions, first thoughts. People, and I think we covered this. Pete Best.
You just a sweetheart and a gentleman, and someone who's come to terms with probably the greatest rock and roll or entertainment tragedy in history. And he's a great guy, and he's got great family. His kids, his great. Thank God he's still with us. And who knows what would have happened if he was a Beatle his whole life. So he is a Beatle his whole life, but not one of the Fab Four. But in my mind, Fab forever.
Yeah, essential to the story. Agreed. You've covered these next two people, but if anything else pops up, please feel free. Paul McCartney.
Down to earth. I mean, the sweetest guy. I love him. He was my favorite growing up. He became my favorite because he became a friend, but it's Paul. I got to see him just a few weeks ago. He was in Yale. He did a speech, an interview as part of his lyrics book.
Yes.
I didn't get to see him. I didn't get to hang out with him, but I got to see him on stage, and he's got, the charisma, the twinkle, the personality, and probably the most creative entertainment musical geniuses, certainly of our lifetime, but possibly of all time.
No disagreement on that one. but again, you can see over my left shoulder here. But much love for everybody else too. And don't worry, they're also on the list here. We miss her. We love her. Linda McCartney.
Oh, see, that's, I get speechless. I loved Linda so much. And we'd see each other at events and backstage, press conferences, and I go, Charles Rosenay goes, I know who you are. You send us copies of Good Day Sunshine. We read them. We love them. Scarsdale, Connecticut. We're not far apart. She would always bring up that she was from Scarsdale and I was Connecticut. And I'm originally from the Bronx. So Scarsdale is right in the middle of Connecticut and the Bronx. And the fact that she would always remember and always have a kind word for not just me, for all the fans. Linda, God, I love you and miss you so much.
Agreed. Someone I'm not sure if you got to meet or not got to meet, but obviously we could not have him on the list. We love him. We miss him as well. John Lennon.
The only one of the four that I never had a close encounter with. Came very close. In 1980, I produced a Beatles convention at Southern Connecticut State College University in New Haven. It was my third year doing it. And it was in October. It was right on Lennon's birthday. So we're going to do something special. We did what we were considering the world's largest birthday card. We had thousands of people sign, brought it to the Guinness Book of World Record first. They rejected it because it was on a bedspread. It was on a sheet. And they said, that's not a card. We can't accept it as that. Anyway, made plans to present it to John personally. I went with my friends Mike Strito, Dean Falcone, my mom at the time, she should rest in peace. And Rolling Stone met us there to take pictures of John receiving it. We had it packed up so nicely. I had a note, and Yoko sent down one of their assistants saying, sorry, John's in Miami. He can't get it from you. Just leave it with us. Was he in Miami? I don't know. But no matter what, we left it. And that would have been my one shot because, as we know, a few months later, we lost John. So never had the opportunity and never thought that I wouldn't someday, but that someday was erased very quickly.
Sadly, yeah. And someone on the list, thank God she's still with us, just celebrated her 90th birthday. You know who I'm going to mention. Yoko Ono. Thoughts, feelings.
Yoko and I exchanged Christmas cards for as long as Good Day Sunshine was being printed, and I would send her issues and she would send me cards, and once the magazine stopped, the cards stopped as well. Yoko, my best memory involves Sean more than Yoko because she was doing an art exhibit in New Haven at a place called the Schubert Theater, one of our favorite landmarks in the area. And she was with Sam Habitoy. She was with Sean. And Sean sort of had nothing to do. Here's this, everyone's dressed up and it's fancy, raise money to sell, prints and all this. And I kind of took Sean under my wing, showed him copies of Good Day Sunshine, hung out with him, said, here's your mom in the magazine. I have pictures of him looking at the magazine. He was enthralled, seeing, his mom on the cover and pictures of him in the magazine and all that. So my best memory of Yoko is of babysitting, or not babysitting, but hanging out and keeping Sean company.
Wow, that is so cool. Well, of course, obviously on my channel, a very belated happy 90th birthday to her, but thank God she's still with us. I think she's, I think she's living in the farm in upstate New York, if I'm recalling correctly, or kind of choosing that. And
yes,
God bless. You know what? Nothing but peace and love, as Ringo might
Amen.
say.
Amen.
But I'm jumping ahead on the list on that one. So, George Harrison.
George, I just, wow, so many levels of appreciation for George. But my close contact with him happened in Japan. We had been going to see him at his concerts where Eric Clapton's band backed him up, and he did 3 shows in Japan, and I brought a group over for it. I brought 40 fans, and we got to see all 3 shows. We went to the Budokan where the Beatles played. There was a Beatles museum. We went there. There was a Beatles shop. There was a cavern club. We did everything. But there was one gal who did nothing but, pray that she was going to meet him. Sure enough, we're at the airport. We're checking in to get our flights back to the States. A few of the gals are going on the California trip. Most of everyone's going to New York with me. Who walks by but George Harrison at the same airport, Narita Airport, when we're there, and we're ringing, George, stop. He goes, I'm not going to stop, but I'm going to keep walking. And he didn't keep walking. He did one of those cartoon things where he stayed in place and his feet kept going. It was hysterical. Took pictures with him. Wound up, I didn't, because I was taking care of checking in the group and all that. But our people wound up in the executive lounge with George. He signed ticket stubs. It's just amazing. So it took us a trip around the world to go to Japan to see him concert, but who would have ever thought that we'd have also had close encounter with him? Funny enough, the 3 gals who went back to California, you're not going to believe this. Talk of kismet and circumstances. Who would have believed it was Bashir to happen? They came on this trip to see Clapton. They were Harrison fans somewhat, and they loved the idea of the historic nature of seeing George with Clapton and his band. They were on the same plane as Eric Clapton going home. Wow, you can't write this stuff up. And I did get backstage for one of the concerts, and George wasn't backstage, but Eric Clapton was. He was sitting in a green room, and he was being given a sword. What are they called? The swords in Japan?
Like a samurai sword?
Samurai, thank you. Yeah. He was being given a samurai sword presentation, and I was in the same room watching the presentation because that was the best backstage access I was able to get. And had George come and watch it too, I would have been in the same room with him for that. But it was just Clapton who got to see that. For some reason, that must have interested him. Eric, if you're listening, are you still into samurai swords? What's going on with that?
I hope he's able to see us. My mind would be blown if he's watching this. George, we love George. We miss George. Next, of course, Olivia Harrison. Did you get to meet her? Did you get to impressions? Ever interact with her?
Yeah, well, I saw Olivia not too long ago. She was at 92nd Street Y in New York. She did an onstage presentation with Martin Scorsese on her book, the book that she recently released. But our communication with her happened during that Japan trip because at all 3 shows, she was always at the soundboard with Donnie. And we'd go over and go, hi, we're those crazy Americans who traveled all the way to Japan. And she laughed and she goes, yeah, great to see you guys. Be safe and all that. And that was pretty much our contact. I didn't think I met her or had anything to do with her other side from those, but the only pleasant, only good memories of that one.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think you know who's coming next. Mr. Ringo Starr, the one and only.
I got to ask Ringo a lot of questions through the years on TV shows, at press conferences. In fact, on the Phil Donahue show many years ago, in those days, I was sort of, because of Good Day Sunshine, I was like a media um, contact. When there was a TV station having a show, and they wanted to fill the audience with Beatle fans, they would contact me at Good Day Sunshine and says, "Hey, we're having Ringo on, this show, this show, this show. Can you fill the audience? Joan Rivers is having Pete Best. We need Beatle fans in the audience up front." Great, I would do that. I did it for Geraldo. We did it for the Phil Donahue was the best one because the whole audience was my friends. It was all Beatle fans. We took a bus, in fact, from Connecticut. So it was New Yorkers, people from Jersey, all over came. And they made sure that if I raised my hand, I would get to ask a question. And everyone was asking Beatle questions. I go, "Ringo, what's it like to be a grandpa?" And he loved answering that. That was a really great question. But I'll tell you the funniest Ringo story was the year that we had Pete Best in Detroit for BeatleCon. We did that 2 years in Detroit. I was a consultant and an MC. And the 1 year we had Mike McCartney as a special guest, and 1 year was Pete Best. Well, I had a t-shirt on and had Pete Best on it with the band, and it said BeatleCon. And I'm at the airport in Detroit, and I'm on my way home. I have these amazing airport stories to share with you. I don't think I've told this many times, but I see Ringo coming around the corner with my friend David Fishoff, who produced the Monkees, managed, their tours and Ringo's tours. And I'm like, Fishoff and Ringo, what a great opportunity to get a picture and get an autograph. And I see them coming around the corner, and I look down and I see that I'm wearing a Pete Best shirt. And I said, "I can't do it." I stopped dead in my tracks. I did it in a reverse. If they recognize me from behind, I'm going to wave like this. I'm not even going to say hello. So that was one of those missed opportunities. Why wasn't I wearing a normal Beatles shirt or a Ringo shirt? I was wearing a Pete Best shirt, and I did not have the ballsies to say hello to Ringo wearing a Pete Best shirt.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my goodness. A couple more folks, I think, as time permits, but certainly,
Yeah.
Barbara Bach.
Never met her. The only time I ever was in the same room was Ringo had what was it? He did paintings that were going to be on credit cards. Jane
Private
Seymour.
Issue, I think it was. Yeah.
You are good. It was Private Issue. And so people were spending a lot of money, and money went to charity to buy the actual paintings of what would be the cards. Others were just getting the card, and I was there as press. And fortunately, because of Good Day Sunshine, I would be invited, and I would have press credentials to a lot of great events. And this was one where I took pictures of both of them, got a lot of great shots, but they weren't as accessible, if I remember correctly. So I didn't get to meet her at the time. It was hosted by Alan Thicke. I don't know if you remember the TV personality.
Growing Pains, yes.
Yeah, and Jane Seymour was there, and it was a really cool event. But that was my only time in the same proximity as the beautiful Barbara Bach, but I never met her.
I think a couple you have met. Mickey Dolenz.
Mickey's great. I've done so many interviews with Mickey Dolenz on stage and at conventions. And, he's been so good to me through the years. When Peter Tork passed, Mickey contributed a great video to a video tribute we put together. Mickey's got, as you know, a great top 10 list in my book of top 10 horror lists, a lot of 50s sci-fi classics. And he's great. The last time we were together was in December. It was Beatles on the Beach. It was a festival in Delray Beach, Florida. I was part of the panel with Mark Hudson and Chris O'Dell. I forgot who else. And of course, Mickey. And Mickey, the famous thing about Mickey and I is he knows when we're on stage, if he doesn't hear a question, well, he'll turn to me and I'll repeat the question, And what happened was it was one of those, someone asked something about the Beatles, and he loves talking about the Beatles. He loves the Beatles, of course. And he said, when they came to America in 65 or 66, what was it, Charles? I go, 64. Yeah, when they came in 64. So I love being on stage with him because I'm that go-to guy for the filling in the facts sometimes. but Mickey's great, and he's carrying the torch. He's the last monkey, and he knows it and respects it, and he bleeds monkeys pinstripes. And God bless him. I hope he's here forever doing their shows. He's touring in April. Guys, if you're watching the show and you haven't seen Mickey, see him live. If you've seen him, see him again. He's got a book coming out by Andrew Sandoval with photos that have never been seen. It's going to be unbelievable. But see him in concert in April. He's doing the Headquarters tour with a lot of tracks from Headquarters. And for fans that don't really know, you mentioned earlier that I produce monkey conventions and I'm very involved with the Monkees fandom. I have a weekend program on the air. It's a station called Monkey Mania Radio. You can hear it on www.live365.com. And I do the Monkees interview show. I get to do what Mr. Broadstreet does. I get to interview monkey celebrities and people connected to the Monkees. And that's been on a couple of years now. And every Saturday and Sunday, we air my interviews. So that's a lot of fun. If you're a Monkees fan, you're listening to the show, check that out as well.
Most definitely. A couple other folks. Well, you already mentioned them, but Peter Tork.
Peter and I were very close. Peter and Davey I considered them friends, because when you have a friend, you can call them on the phone. And I remember Davey would call me just out of clear blue sky, and it's like, "Hey Charles, I found these Beatles bubblegum cards. What are they worth?" You go, "Davey who?" And he's got, "All right, yeah, anyway." And I go, "I don't know, a buck a piece?" He goes, "Ah, rats. Okay, bye." And he'd hang up. For Peter, he was at so many of my conventions back to 1982, when a monkey or a Beatle had never been at it. No monkey had been a Monkees convention. No Beatle had been a Beatles convention until Pete Best did it. And Peter came to us in 1982 at a Monkees convention, the 4th annual Monkees convention that I did in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They had been in New Jersey prior to that. Peter Tork came. He sang with the Monkey Tribute Band. He signed autographs. He spoke on stage. Spoke about John Lennon passing and all that. Anyway, so Peter and I kept in touch through the years. He was at our National Monkey Convention in 1987 with Mickey and Davey. He'd been to all the shows we'd done, 2013, whatever. But I did a Beatles expo in Connecticut in 2009, 2010. I said, "I'd love for you to come as my guest, Peter Tork." He goes, "It's a Monkees convention." I go, "It's a Beatles convention." "What am I going to do at a Beatles convention?" He goes, "I know, you'll figure it out." And I said, "Well, Davey was at one, years early." He goes, "Whatever you need." And when he said "whatever you need," I loved hearing that, because the next conversation was, "Hey, Peter, I can get us on the Channel 8, on Channel 61, on all these news programs to promote my Beatles convention. Are you there?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll do it for you." And he drove up in his sports car, and we hung out, and he was on those shows. Peter was very good to me. He was just such a sweetheart and so intelligent and so funny. Big place in my heart for Peter and Davey, but Peter was always so good to me. I appreciate that.
And I know, George was a big fan of Peter's banjo playing, like he invented the instrument. And you kind of touched on Davey. That was actually going to be my next one, but I'll add one more for a substitution, and then I'll get to one last person. But so we'll finish off with Davey. You described a little bit, Mike Nesmith.
So he was the last one that I ever got to meet, and it was at a solo show in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I helped promote it because ticket sales were not what they should have been, and I said, "Well." They said, "Well, can we give you some tickets in exchange?" I go, "I bought my tickets. I have front row. I got them the second they went on sale." I said, "How's about the meet and greet?" Well, I brought this drumhead with me, which was already signed by Mickey and Peter, and he wasn't signing anything except the one item from that concert. And I was the first one in line for the meet and greet. And he said, "Well, I can't not sign this. The other guys have." So he's really nice. Signed that, signed one or two other items. I go, "You're like an uncle I've known my whole life and never met. Can I hug you?" And the people in the meet and greet all heard that. And they all went, "Oh." And he hugged me like he knew me forever. And that'll be what I remember Mike as. Nez was just Papa Nez to so many people, but that's the memory that I'll always live with, him hugging me and signing the drum head for me. He was so nice. And, you know, it erased many years of wondering, is this guy too cocky? Is this guy too aloof? Is this guy the reason, you know, the Four Monkeys really haven't poured together as a group? You know, as the years went by, we know he mellowed. We know he got a lot more fan conscious. But if that's the only memory I have for him, man, I'll take that.
That, and on top of producing one of my favorite offbeat movies of the '80s, Repro Man.
Great.
Executive producer. And he's got a little cameo in that film too. If anybody has ever seen it, maybe you have, but you know, as I think rabbi character in one of the scenes.
Tip of the hat to George Harrison. Tip of the hat to Mike Nesmith for putting out such great films.
Yes,
aside from great music.
100%, 100%. Well, I even had more with songs and records, but you know what? I'm thinking we could save that for another time. I would love to have you back on.
Of course.
One more person, Denny Lane.
So you're picking people who you must know I have great stories about these people. Denny was supposed to be at my Beatles convention in the mid '80s, and it was at the Trumbull Marriott. I hadn't done a show for a year or two, and Denny was he was the main guest. He'd never done a convention in the States. We had him and John Lennon's sister, Julia. I mean, whoa, those were two, you know, big name convention guests. We had great bands, great vendors. I remember the parking lot overflowed and the police were freaking out and the fire marshal because they couldn't contain as many people as coming. Well, I get a call the day before that Denny ain't coming. Denny was not allowed to come into the U.S. And we said, oh, it's got to be drugs. It's got to be. Well, the reason was he was bringing his guitar with him because he was going to surprise me and perform. Well, when he got to the airport, they said, do you have your visa? He said, no, I'm just coming over as a guest. You're not performing? No. Well, why do you have a guitar? And they denied him access. And he said, I've got this convention. I got on the phone with every politician I knew. I thought in 12 hours we could somehow make it work. No, it didn't happen. And it was very unfortunate. As it turned out, his wife or ex-wife, JoJo Lane, was there. His daughter came. And we put them on stage, you know, and we explained. And everyone understood, you know, he couldn't get in the country. But years later, we met at a Beatles convention in Liverpool. We hugged, and he told me the story. And he said he was sorry, and he said, I'll make it up to me. And my parents had passed. And it was my parents who went through the, I can't even tell you the agita from when he canceled, what we went through in that 24-hour period of, oh my God, our main guest isn't here. Well, our main guest became John Lennon's sister, Julia, and she was unbelievable. We've stayed friends to this day, you know, 40 years of friendship with Pete Best, 35 years of friendship with Julia. And Denny Lane, and we still see each other. He came to a convention, whatever the year Peter Tork was there, I think Denny Lane was the year that the other year. So it was either 2009, 2010. And he came and he signed autographs, and, you know, we're still in touch. And Denny is, you know, Denny is Denny. Go Now, one of the great songs of all time.
Oh, 100%.
We've already said, play the piano, go now. I love that intro. And there's another intro I love that's very underrated. It starts, you can wait another night. What is the beginning of No More Lonely Nights? What is it?
Oh, you are speaking my language. You are.
Wait another. I forgot what
that was actually one of my follow-up questions, believe it or not. Yeah, some quick bits about that. That is my top #1 song.
I know.
Love that intro. Love that song. Favorite McCartney song of all time, hands down for me.
So underrated. So beautiful.
Yeah, a top 10 hit that never gets played live or even on terrestrial radio anymore.
Yeah.
No, I you know, a few weeks ago I was fortunate. My stepmom got tickets for myself and my father and me to go see him down at the music room down on Cape Cod. Denny Lane.
Wow.
It was managed to get his autograph, managed to meet him. He's, you know, he was a little shorter than I thought he would be. I'm 5'8". I'm not a very tall person, but kind of standing next to me, I was like, well, I thought he'd be a little taller, but very down to earth. I
Yeah.
was starstruck. I'm just like, wow, starstruck. I'm shaking. I have my pen. He had his Sharpie pen already. He's coming out, signing some stuff for the fans. And
Cool.
a total joy to see. So I could 100% relate to that.
The two diminutive, I don't use the word short because I'm 5'5", so I'm down there too. The two guys who you're surprised at their height is Denny and Joey Molland. If you've ever stood next to them, those are ones, because you see people on stage, they're 10 feet tall. But when they're next to you, right, you realize that they ain't the giants. They ain't they ain't dunking no baskets.
Yeah, no, me neither. Believe me. But you know what? First of all, Charles, thank you so much. I would love to have you back on for a future show. I would really
Definitely.
love to do that. I'm still I got some. I have more songs and records, but you know what? I know we're running a tiny bit short on time. So, besides your latest project, I'm just going to say again, thank you so much for being on the show. Just kind of one final question. This is a very easy one, I think,
Yes.
and I'll make sure to link to everything down below in the description for everybody that's watching. That'll be
Yes.
watching this later. How can people contact you? Where can people find you?
So the website liverpooltours.com is a great way, because that not only talks about the Beatle tours we do to London and Liverpool, but it's got the contact information. Of course, I'm on Facebook for the Beatles book, which I hope the scroll is going as we talk. www.bookoftop10beatleslists.com. That I'm sure has the contact email. Just Google Charles Rosenay. You'll find me. I'm not hard to find. I've been around a long time and been doing so many great, I'd like to think great Beatle things that have made a lot of people happy through the years. But yeah, be in touch. Get the book. It's on Amazon, or contact me directly if you want, a signed copy. I'd be honored. And I'll be at conventions. I'll be at festivals. I'll be at libraries. I might be coming to your town. A lot of places. Oh wait, wrong band. A lot of places to meet and hopefully share a few laughs. You and I didn't know each other till a convention. So thank goodness for conventions. We hooked up. Now we're friends. We have so many similar, we're, kindred souls, so many similar loves and tastes. And it's just been a pleasure being on your show. I thank you for asking me.
Yeah, Charles, again, thank you so much. An honor. Like I said, just to wrap it up. Well, first of all, I hope folks out there, if you're enjoying the content, please make sure to make a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Again, Charles, I'll make sure I'll link to your information below. It may not be scrolling across the screen, but it will be below. It will be in the description. There you go. Book of Top 10 lists. That'll be on my order. And the autographs are always nice. You've also got Top 10 book, the Book of Top 10 horror lists as well. Definitely recommended. And I'm not much of a horror person myself, but I was fascinated by the lists and just reading through them, going, okay, and especially Pete's list on page 37, as I've got it bookmarked. Just totally a great time. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll definitely have you back. I'll link to your information. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Just thank you, and I do look forward to seeing you again in person and being on your show again when the opportunity arises. Thank you so much. I give my regards to Mr. Broadstreet.
Thank you, Charles. I'm very flattered. Thank you so much, everybody. Be safe. I will see everybody next time. And Charles, again, thank you so much. And we'll wrap up there. Yes, definitely doing the wing sign. All right, everybody. Goodbye.